Section 3 of the Endeavour Journal of Sir Joseph Banks. Journal from 25 August 1768 to 12 July 1777. By Joseph Banks. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Gail Timmerman Vaughan. Section 3. October 1768. 1768, October 1. This morn bonitos were in great plenty about the ship. We were called up early to see one that had been struck, found it to be the Scomber Palamas Lynn, had a drawing made of it. I confess, however, that I was a good deal disappointed, expecting to find the animal much more beautiful than it proved, though its colours were extremely lively, especially the blue lines on the back, which equalled at least any ultramarine. Yet the name and accounts I had heard from all who had seen them made me expect an animal of a much greater variety of colour. This consisted of no more than blue lines on the back crossing each other, a gold and purple changeable on the sides, and white with black lines on the bottom of the sides and belly. After having examined and drawn the animal, we proceeded to dissect him, and in the course of the operation were much pleased by the infinite strength we observed in every part of him, especially the stomach, the coats of which were uncommonly strong, especially about the sphincter, or extremity by which the digested meat is discharged. This, I suppose, is intended to crush and render useful the scales and bones of fishes, which this animal must continually swallow without separating them from the flesh. From the inside of its scales we took a small animal, who seemed to be a louse, if I may so call it, as it certainly stuck to him and preyed upon the juices which it extracted by suction, probably much to his disquiet. It proved to be Monoculus piscinus Lynn, which Baster has given a figure of in his opera subsessive, but has by some unlucky accident mistaken the head to be the tail, and the tail the head, and the ovaria for antennae. In the inside of the fish were also found two animals which preyed upon him, one in his very flesh, though near the membrane which covers the intestines, Fasciola pelamenes, MSS, the other in the stomach, Sipunculus piscium, MSS. 1768, October 2. This morn 2 swallows were about the ship, though we must now be 60 leagues at least from the land. At night one of them is taken, and proved to be Hirundo domestica, Lynn. 1768, October 3. This morn the other swallow was found dead upon the deck. Now for the first time we have lost the trade, and expected calm and squally weather till we shall cross the line. The trade had now lasted us, pretty free from squalls or calms, these many days. It has been in general between but ever since we have been in it, the air has been uncommonly damp, everything more than usual liable to mould, and all the ironwork to rust. The air has seldom been clear, but a haze in it, which was even perceivable to the human frame. 1768, October 4. Today quite calm. I went out in a boat and took Dagus streamosa, Medusa purpurita, the same which we before called azurea, Mimus volutator, and simex, who runs upon the water here in the same manner as C. lacustris does in our ponds in England. Towards even, 2 small fish were taken under the stern. They were following a shirt which was towing, and showed not the least signs of fear, so that they were taken with a landing net without the least difficulty. Ballistes monoceros, Lynn. 1768, October 5. Weather pretty good. At night a squall with lightning and rain. Another swallow came to the ship today and was taken with the snippers as soon as he went to roost. 1768, October 6. Blew fresh this morn with heavy rain. Towards noon 5 swallows came on board, and were taken at roosting time, and proved, like all we had taken before, to be H. domestica Lynn. This morning calm. We went out in the boat, and took what is called by the seamen a Portuguese man of war, Holotheria physalis Lynn. Also Medusa velella L. Onidium spinosum, MSS. Diodon erinaceus, MSS. Dagus avistria, MSS. Helix janthina, Lynn. Helix violacea, MSS. And Brosilaria oceanica, MSS. The Holotheria proved to be one of the most beautiful sights I had ever seen. It consisted of a small bladder in shape, much like the air bladder of fishes, from the bottom of which descended a number of strings of bright blue and red, some 3 or 4 feet in length, which, if touched, stung the person who touched them in the same manner as nettles, only much stronger. On the top of this bladder was a membrane which he turned either one way or the other, as the wind blew to receive it. This was veined with pink in an uncommonly beautiful manner. In short, the whole together was one of the most beautiful sights I have seen among the mollusca, though many of them are beautiful. The floating shells H. janthina and violacea, from their particularity, deserve also to be mentioned. They are found floating on the top of the water by means of a small cluster of bubbles filled with air, which are composed of a tenacious slimy substance, not easily parting with its contents. These keep him suspended on the surface of the water, and serve as a hiding for his eggs, and it is probable that he never goes down to the bottom, or willingly comes near any shore, as his shell is of so brittle a construction that few freshwater snails are so thin. Every shell contains within it a teaspoonful of liquid, which it easily discharges on being touched. This is of a most beautiful red-purple colour, and easily dyes linen clothes. It may be well worth inquiry whether or not this is the purpura of the ancients, as the shell is certainly found in the Mediterranean. We have not yet taken a sufficient quantity of the shells to try the experiment. Probably we shall do soon. Procellaria oceanica differs very little from P. pelagica Linn., but from its place of abode so far south, and some small difference in plumage, it is more than likely that he is different in species. 1768, October 8. A fine breeze today. Employed in figuring etc. what was taken yesterday. 1768, October 9. This morn a shark called us out of our beds, and was soon hooked, but as soon broke his hold and went off. At noon went out in the boat, but found nothing on the surface of the water. On returning home, however, found on the stern of the ship 2 species of Lepus vittata and Midas. They were both sticking to the bottom in company with the Anatifera, of which there was a great abundance. After dinner, called upon deck by another shark, who had been lately wounded by a harpoon, but he was too cunning after his misfortune to bite at our baits, which we much lamented, as he had sucking fish upon him that were quite white, probably a species not yet described. 1768, October 10. Went out in the boat today, took plenty of Helix janthina, and some few of violacea. Shot the black-toed gull of Penn, Zool. It had not yet been described according to Linnaeus's system, so called it Larus crepidatus. Its food here seems to be chiefly helixes, which appeared probable at least, on account of its dung having been of a lively red colour, much like that which was procured from the shells. I was drove home from this excursion by a very heavy squall of rain, which entirely wetted me through long before it was possible to return to the ship. However, I received no other harm from the ducking than the present inconvenience of being so thoroughly wet. The remainder of today was very squally with much rain. Indeed, it has been so ever since we lost the trade, and the people who have been here before say that it is generally so in these latitudes. I can liken it to nothing so much as April in England, when it is very showery. The weather is never certain for 2 hours, or indeed half the time, though the calms spend much of the greatest part of our time in idleness. 1768, October 11. Today, much like yesterday, very squally. Saw a dolphin and admired the infinite beauty of his colour as he swam in the water, but in vain. He would not give us even a chance of taking him. 1768, October 12. A shark, Squalus carcharius Linn., taken this morning, and with him 2 pilot fish. At noon, calm. I went out in the boat and took several blubbers. The pilot fish, Gasterosteus ductor Linn., is certainly as beautiful a fish as can be imagined. It is of a light blue with cross streaks of darker colour. It is wonderful to see them about a shark swimming round him without expressing the least signs of fear. What their motive for doing so is, I cannot guess, as I cannot find that they get any provision by it, or any other emolument, except possibly the company of the shark keeps them free from the attacks of dolphins or other large fish of prey, who would otherwise devour them. The blubbers taken today were Bero labiata and Marsupialis MSS, the first of which made a pretty appearance in the water by reason of its swimmers, which line its sides like fringes, and are of a changeable fire colour. Calirobivia MSS, the most lifeless lump of jelly I have seen. It scarcely seems to be possessed of life, but for 1 or 2 motions we saw it make. 1768, October 13. Calm this morn. A shark was taken, but not 1 pilot fish attended him, which is rather uncommon, as they seldom are without a shoal of from 10 to 20. At noon I went in the boat and took the Sallyman Phyllodosi valella Linn., who was a sailor, though inferior in size to the Portuguese man-of-war, yet not without its beauty, chiefly from the charming blue of its bottom. Its sail is transparent but not movable, so it trusts itself to the mercy of the winds, without being able to turn to windward, as the Portuguese man-of-war maybe can. We saw several of the latter today, and observed many small fish under their tentacula, who seemed to shelter there, as if with its stings it could defend them from large enemies. 1768, October 14. Calm today, but so squally and rainy that I dared not venture out with the boat. 1768, October 15. Ventured out today, but found the surface of the water so ruffled that nothing at all floated upon it. I had the good fortune, however, to see a bird of the shearwater kind, which I shot, and it proved to be not described. It was about as large as the common, but differed from it in being whiter, especially about the face. Called it Procelaria crepidata, as its feet were like the gulls shot last week, black without, but white near the legs. A large shoal of fish were all this day under the ship's stern, playing about but refusing to take bait. We, however, contrived to take one of them with a fish gig, which proved not described. It was in make and appearance like a carp, weighing nearly 2 pounds. Its sides were ornamented with narrow yellow lines, and its fins almost entirely covered with scales. Called it Catodon cyprinaceus. 1768, October 16. A fine breeze of wind started up last night, which held us all day, so I found it impossible to go out in the boat. Tonight, however, to make these 24 hours not entirely unprofitable, I had the opportunity of seeing a phenomenon I had never met before with. A lunar rainbow, which appeared about 10 o'clock very faint, and almost or quite without colour, so that it could be traced by little more than an appearance which looked like shade on a cloud. 1768, October 17. This morn went out in the boat, but caught no one thing. I have never been before so unfortunate. In the evening a breeze of wind sprung up from the southeast by south, which makes us hope we had got the southeast trade. 1768, October 18. Wind continued to blow fresh, so we had little doubt of the reality of yesterday's hopes. This evening, trying, as I have often, foolishly no doubt, done to exercise myself by playing tricks with 2 ropes in the cabin, I got a fall which hurt me a good deal, and alarmed me more, as the blow was on my head, and 2 hours after it I was taken with sickness at my stomach, which made me fear some ill consequence. 1768, October 19. Today, thank God, I was much better in east of all apprehensions, the wind continuing fair, and I had given over all thoughts of boat expeditions, for some time at least. 1768, October 20. Quite well today, employed in describing and attending the draughtsman. 1768, October 21. Trade continues. Today the cat killed our bird M. avida, who had lived with us ever since the 29th September, entirely on the flies which he caught for himself. He was hearty and in high health, so that probably he might have lived a great while longer had fate been more kind. 1768, October 22. Trade had got more to the southward than it usually had been, which was unlucky for me, as I proposed to the captain to touch for part of a day, at least, at the island of Fernanda Noronha, which he had no objection to if we could fetch it. That, however, seemed very uncertain. This evening we saw 6 or 7 large fish of the whale kind, which the seamen call grampuses, though I think they were very different from the fish commonly so called. They were, however, certainly of the whale kind, and blew through 2 pipes on the top of their heads. They had heads smaller and rounder than those fish in general have, and very low back fins, and very small tails. Thus much was all that I could see, as they never came within 2 cable lengths of the ship. 1768, October 23. Trade today was still more to the southward, almost due south, so that we tacked and stood to the eastward, lest we should fall in with the coast of Brazil to the northward of Cape Frio. 1768, October 24. Wind today as fair as we could wish. Ship laid up so well that it renewed our hopes of touching at the island. About noon today we experienced what the seamen call a white squall. That is a gust of wind, which came upon us quite unawares, unattended with a cloud, as squalls in general are, and therefore took us quite unprepared. It was, however, very slight, so no ill consequence ensued except Mr. Parkinson and his pots going leeward, which diverted us more than it hurt him. 1768, October 25. Crossed equator. This morn, about 8 o'clock, crossed the equinoctial line in about 33 degrees west latitude from Greenwich, at the rate of 4 knots, which our seamen said was an uncommonly good breeze, the thermometer standing at 29. The thermometer used in the voyage are 2 of Mr. Bird's making, after Fahrenheit's scale, which seldom differ above a degree from each other, and that not till they are as high as 80 degrees, in which case the medium between the 2 instruments is set down. This evening the ceremony of ducking the ship's company was performed as always customary on crossing the line, when those who have crossed it before claim a right of ducking all that have not. The whole of the ceremony I shall describe. About dinner time, a list was brought into the cabin, containing the names of every body and thing aboard the ship, in which the dogs and cats were not forgot. To this was affixed a petition, signed the ship's company, desiring leave to examine every body in that list, that it might be known whether or not they had crossed the line before. This was immediately granted. Every body was then called upon the quarter-deck and examined by one of the lieutenants who had crossed. He marked every name either to be ducked or let off, according as their qualifications directed. Captain Cook and Dr. Solander were on the blacklist, as were myself, my servants, and dogs, which I was obliged to compound for by giving the duckers a certain quantity of brandy, for which they willingly excused us the ceremony. Many of the men, however, chose to be ducked, rather than give up 4 days' allowance of wine, which was the price fixed upon. And as for the boys, they are always ducked, of course, so that about 21 underwent the ceremony, which was performed thus. A block was made fast to the end of the main yard, and a long line revved through it, to which 3 cross pieces of wood were fastened, one of which was put between the legs of the man who was to be ducked, and to this he was tied very fast. Another was for him to hold in his hands, and the third was over his head, lest the rope should be hoisted too near the block, and by that means the man hurt. When he was fastened upon this machine, the boatswain gave the command by his whistle, and the man was hoisted up as high as the crosspiece over his head would allow, when another signal was made, and immediately the rope was let go, and his own weight carried him down. He was then immediately hoisted up again, and 3 times served in this manner, which was every man's allowance. Thus ended the diversion of the day, for the ducking lasted till almost night, and sufficiently diverting it certainly was to see the different faces that were made on this occasion, some grinning and exulting in their heartiness, whilst others were almost suffocated, and came up ready enough to have compounded after the first or second duck, had such proceeding been allowable. It is now time that I should say something of the climate and degree of heat since crossing the tropic, as we have been for some time within the bounds, which were supposed by the ancients to be uninhabitable on account of their heat. Almost immediately on crossing the tropic the air became sensibly much damper than usual, though not materially hotter. The thermometer then in general stood from 80 to 82. The nearer we approached to the combs, still damper everything grew. This was perceivable even to the human body, and very much so, but more remarkably upon all kinds of furniture. Everything made of iron rusted so fast that the knives in people's pockets became almost useless, and the razors in cases not free. All kinds of leather became mouldy. Portfolios and trunks covered with black leather were almost white. Soon after this mould adhered to almost everything. All the books in my library became so mouldy that they were obliged to be wiped to preserve them. About this time we came into the calms, which we met with earlier than usual. The thermometer was then at 83, and we suffered from the heat and damp together. Bathing, however, kept me in perfect health, though many of the ship's company were ill of bilious complaints, which, however, were but of short duration. This continued till we got the southeast trade, when, or a little before, the glass fell to 88, and soon to 79 and 78, but the dampness continued yet. To that I chiefly attribute the ill success of the electrical experiments, of which I have wrote an account on separate papers, that the different experiments may appear at one view. The air during the whole time since we crossed the tropic, and indeed some time before, has been nearly the same temperature throughout the 24 hours. The thermometer seldom rising above a degree during the time the sun is above the horizon. The windows of the cabin have been open without once being shut ever since we left Madeira. 1768, October 26. Last night and today the weather has been squally, wind rather fresh but keeping very much to the southward. Great plenty of flying fish have been about the ship, few or none of which have been seen since we left the northeast trade. 1768, October 27. Fine weather, but wind rather too much to the southward. We are today nearing the latitude of the island of Fernand de Noronha, so that I am not without hopes of making it, if rightly laid down. Night, however, put an end to our hopes for the present at least, and left us in no very agreeable situation, as shoals and foul ground is laid down all round the islands. 1768, October 28. Fine breeze today. Our hopes of seeing the island were again renewed, but without success, so at night we judge ourselves to be past it, and that the longitude is wrong laid down. 1768, October 29. Wind east, very pleasant. We now gave up all thoughts of the island. This evening the sea appeared uncommonly beautiful, flashes of light coming from it, perfectly resembling small flashes of lightning, and these so frequent that sometimes 8 or 10 were visible at the same moment. The seamen were divided in their accounts, some assuring us that it proceeded from fish, who made the light by agitating the salt water, as they called it, in their darting at their prey, while others said that they had often seen them and knew them to be nothing but blubbers, medusas. This made us very eager to procure some of them, which at last we did, one by the help of a landing net. They proved to be a species of medusa, which when brought on board appeared like metal violently heated, emitting a white light. On the surface of this animal a small lepus was fixed, exactly the colour of it, which was almost transparent, not unlike thin starch, in which a small quantity of blue is dissolved. In taking these animals, 3 or 4 species of crabs were taken, but also very small, one of which gave light full as much as a glowworm in England, though the creature was not so large by 9/10. Indeed, the sea this night seemed to abound with light in an uncommon manner, as if every inhabitant of it furnished its share, which might have been the case, though none kept that property after being brought out of the water, except these 2. 1768, October 30. This morn employed in examining the things caught last night, which being taken by the light of our lamps, for the wind, which blows in at the windows, always open, will not suffer us to burn candles. We could hardly then distinguish into genera, much less into species. Had the good fortune to find that they were all quite new. Called them Medusa pellucens, Lepus pellucens, Clio, Cancer fulgens, and Cancer amplectens. But we have the misfortune to lose 2 more species of crabs overboard by the tumbling of a glass overboard in which they were contained. In the evening the sea was lighted in the same manner as it was last night, only more nearly so strong. We renewed, however, our endeavours to take some of the light carriers, not without success, as 2 new species of crabs were taken, one of which was very singular. 1768, October 31. Nothing to be done today. Found, however, that the crabs taken yesterday were both new, called them vitreous and crassicornis. End of section 3, October 1768.